I'm now going to hand over to Baroness Estelle Morris and to Eden Sill from our Young People's Group, and they're going to talk in more detail about those priorities.
Good afternoon. My name's Estelle Morris, and your name is?
Sill.
And we're going to do a bit of a double act here. First of all, we're just going to tell you who we are and how we've got to be doing this double act and what we've been working together on recently. And now I'm going to start. Oh, you're on the clicker, Eden, don't forget.
I can do the clicker.
You're on the clicker, okay. So my name's Estelle Morris, and I started my working life as a teacher. So I taught for 18 years in the inner city in a comprehensive school in Coventry. Then I was elected as a Member of Parliament. And during that time, I spent 5 years as a minister in the Department for Education in the last Labour government, the one before this. So since then, I'm now a member of the House of Lords and continue to take an active interest in education. I wouldn't claim to have thorough knowledge of all the latest bits of the law and how the finance system works, but I am still interested in what happens to young people. And I can't quite remember how I got involved with Enables. It's one of those examples of you said yes to something that you didn't really think twice about. But it sort of happened about 5 years ago, and I must admit that I've done it with increasing energy and enthusiasm ever since. So they won't let me escape. But what I do now is my bit of the role, and to tell the truth, Eden, a lot of the things we're going to say were said by our previous speakers. But what I do now is I'm active in the parliamentary all-party parliamentary group, which I think is doing quite well, and I want to try and bring that out as we're going along. And I work with the youth group, which is called Yeah Baby, which I think is very trendy and doesn't easily slip off my tongue, which Eden is a member of. So I see Eden I don't know, at the moment it seems to be several times a year.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do really is working with Eden and your friends,
yes,
and working with the parliamentary group. We're trying to focus on a few things that we hope might change just a little bit of the world.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay, so that's me and Eden.
Hello, I'm Eden Sill. I'm a member of the UKABIF group, and I'm also I'm an expert of experience. So I'm 21 years old. I got my brain injury when I was 6.5, which are 3 words too big for a 6-year-old to understand. For me, I got encephalitis and then subsequently got a brain injury. It was just a normal day. I felt a tiny bit ill, but nothing you'd notice. And I would have gone to school if Mum hadn't happened to have thought, just in case, and we stayed home and watched Barbie. I had a massive seizure that day and I fell into a coma. But I'm lucky. It seems strange to say after saying that, but I am. I had a doctor who happened to walk past my room completely by chance and said, "Have you tried this treatment?" And it was the treatment for encephalitis. I wouldn't be here if that hadn't have happened. Though my life was irrevocably changed forever. At the time, me and my family knew nothing of acquired brain injury, so them and I had to learn very quickly. My mum started a charity, the Eden Dora Trust, and they help other families and educators. So I've been surrounded through that and through my own experience for about 14 years now with acquired brain injury, so quite a long time to learn my way. The journey with acquired brain injury never ends. That's something we're going to talk about a lot today, with its growths and its challenges. So what are we trying to change and how? There's a lot we're trying to change. I'm sure you've learned that by the end of today. But we are personally focusing on 3 key aims, with training and awareness, data collection in schools / the education system, and timely and flexible provision for acquired needs. That's what we're going to talk about mainly today.
Right.
Over to you.
Right, so we've done a lot of talking. It's important. Those 3 things are the 3 things where we think we can make a difference. So rather than talk about everything all the time, we've focused on that.
Yeah.
And I think listening to the minister speaking this morning, I could hear from her things we've been campaigning and talking about for the last 2 years, and that was very encouraging. So I think it does show that we're right to have focused and we are making something of a difference. Right, so why does that matter? Why did we choose training and experience? So Eden, you're going to go first
Yes.
on this from your point of view, and then I'm
Yeah.
going to do my point of view.
So, oopsie. So training and awareness are two massive aspects of an acquired brain injury and dealing with an acquired brain injury in education. From my personal experience, which is the main thing I can talk from, and the experience of people inside the Your Baby group, some of us have been luckier than others, and some of us have experienced lots of challenges in terms of a lack of training and a lack of awareness. The one thing we've all experienced is, like I said, that lack of awareness. Nobody knows about acquired brain injury. Obviously, you guys all do, because you're here, you're in this room, you've heard about it all day. But there isn't enough people that know enough about it. We have to go through school as if we are any other child with some sort of, I don't want to say difference, because it feels wrong to say difference, because we're just as valid as anyone else. And it's something we talk about a lot in the group, is we don't feel like we have a category that we fit into. And because there is a lack of awareness of acquired brain injury, we feel like that's why the categories don't exist as much. If teachers had more training, if people had more training, maybe it would filter down. But I won't spoil too much because we're going to talk a bit about that later.
And I think why I think it matters is looking back to my time as a teacher and my time as a minister. That's why I think it matters, because we've not had the training and awareness. I remember saying to Chloe or to somebody at one point, when I heard that figure that it's one or two children in every class, I actually thought that cannot be true. I taught in a secondary school over 18 years. And if you work that out, that's probably 5 or 6 class groups every year, 25 to 30 people in each year times 18. And to be honest, I didn't knowingly ever teach a child with ABI. Now, I know I taught some time ago, but that can't be right. So what I learned from that, I had taught children with ABI, and I'd not known about it. I don't know how I could possibly do well for them and give them the sort of start in life I thought I was trying to do when I didn't know of their conditions. I have thought back often, as you often think about things you did years ago. I've already, over the past couple of years, identified certain young boys or girls who, looking back, probably had an ABI. Their behaviour exhibits some of the things I've learnt about being a member of that group. So that's one of the main reasons I got involved in that group. I think you sometimes become very interested in the things you missed years ago, and you try to almost 2 steps back to pick them up and take them forward. So when I then began to think about my time as a minister, I think years ago, I think I was the minister responsible for SEN in the department at one point. And again, I can't remember discussing children with ABI. And that was more recently. That was in the start of the century, start of the 2000s. When I think about that, I think one of the problems is, does it fit into SEN? And every time I say that, I've learned not to say that when we meet, because sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But if you put it into SEN, it means you close your mind down to lots of other things as well. So my main aim really is it's the awareness bit rather than the training, because unless you raise awareness, there's no good training anybody because you don't know what they're training them for. So the SEN system that we've got at the moment doesn't accommodate ABI. I share Joe's enthusiasm about the reform of the SEN system. And personally, I don't think it's now, at this point, until we get the paper in January, I don't think it's worth really focusing on the EHCPs. The ideal would be that teachers have enough awareness and enough training to know what they're doing for the child is right, and to have the confidence to seek expert advice when they feel they can't manage by themselves. And personally, I don't mind whether that's got an EHCP attached to it or not. I really don't, because the EHCP has never actually changed learning for a child. It just facilitates something else. So it's focusing on what it facilitates more than anything else. So I would like us to move from when I was the minister in charge of this, where we didn't have ABI on the agenda. I really want the next version of our special education needs and children with learning challenges to incorporate this as well. Just say one more thing, because I think this is particularly difficult. You often say this. You were 6 by the time you got in. You had your illness. You often say to me that children come in and out. It differs. And the system's not good at dealing with that. The SEN system deals with people who often have born at birth, identified early, and goes all the way through school. So Eden, I'm going to hand over you now because you wanted to say something about training people other than teachers.
So one of the things we talk about a lot as people with experience is the fact that often, obviously, training for teachers is so, so important. If you don't know what you're handling in a classroom, if you don't know what a person has, how a person operates, how are you supposed to be able to help that child? How are you supposed to be able to tailor what you need to give that child as a better thing to help them? But one of the main things that we talk about is how it isn't just on teachers in a school system. It's also on people like the rest of the school staff, lunchtime supervisors, and extracurricular staff. Because it shouldn't mean that if you have an acquired brain injury, you can't partake in outside of curriculum. Like, I have an example from when I was in school. There was a club set up for people to sign up to come and sit with me at lunch, which is, as you can imagine, quite shocking. I didn't know this club existed. My mum didn't know this club existed. I only discovered years later that had happened. Obviously, that's just a really good example of why it's always a good idea to talk to the people with the experience, because I would have hated that. The idea that people are signing up to sit with me rather than just naturally wanting to be friends. And that's why it's so important that everyone has that awareness of what it affects and how we need to talk to people like me about these issues.
And so that was our first issue. And our second issue was data collection.
Yes,
and this has
already
been
covered
mentioned.
amazingly, I hope.
It was very powerfully. But you're going to start on this one, Eden.
Yeah, so I think it's another example of how, even though, as I mentioned previously, my mum, after I got ill, realised there was nothing out there for anyone. So she started an amazing charity and is out there helping people. And so I had that kind of person who was out there who could help push me as well as these other people, could help support me, could help fight for me with teachers in systems that weren't designed for me, in all of these things. And even I still fell through the cracks. I had teachers who didn't know I had these EHCPs, who didn't know I had any documentation, who didn't even know that I needed to type on a laptop rather than write in exams, until it got to the exam and I said, "Can I have my laptop, please?" And they said, "Well, I assumed you'd be writing." Because people don't know and they aren't given that push. And I had my mum and I still fell through the cracks. So can you imagine people who don't have that person behind them, who don't have a family who have the ability to push, who have other children who may have needs, who need them as much as this other child? I was lucky that my brother was an amazing support system. He learnt very quickly, along with the rest of my family, that I needed a little bit of extra with things. And I'm very lucky that I had that support system, but lots of people don't. And we need to campaign for those people as much as we campaign for the ones who can push on their own as well.
Okay, and really, I mean, just counting children's and publishing the numbers isn't very good. It's what you do with it. So you just have to remember, data collection's important in its own right, but what the real judgment is what you do with the data when you've got it. And I actually think the school system is very good at using data when it's got it. I think it's been one of the big reforms in education over the last 20 years, and it is now very data rich. Talked about bringing together the health data and the education data. That data that's been built up in the school system over the last 20 to 25 years gives lots of people an opportunity to now to link with it. It's at pupil level, as well as at school level, local authority level and regional level. And it's also broke down by ethnicity and social class and gender as well. So it's very powerful. What I'm absolutely convinced about, I can look back through my time in politics, and when we've known what the data is, believe it or not, we're quite good at addressing it as a challenge and improving things. And it also means that people, civic life, who have an interest in this, they've got the data as well. So they can put pressure on the policymakers to do something about it. It gives the campaigners evidence, and it gives the teachers evidence that there's a problem that needs to be solved. And over the years, there's so many examples of where we've got data, I think that we've managed to do something about it. Examples at the moment, I don't think we've certainly not solved this problem at the moment, but the only reason we're worried as a nation about the number of children truanting from school, missing school, is because we've got the data. And that data increase has happened it happened mainly post-COVID. Without that data collection, we wouldn't be beginning to address it as an issue. So 2 things there. We've got to collect the data, but remembering that collecting the data isn't good enough by itself. It's what you do with the data. But that's the area where I've got most confidence in our education system, that given the data and given the political will and everyone being on the same bus, as you like, because the data underpins it, joins them together, I'm quite confident that something can be done.
And as Hope mentioned, there's the data we need of how people with ABIs change so drastically over time. I myself obviously have had this since I was 6.5 years old. That's 14 years. I've changed so much. It's 14 years I've learnt to mask my condition, to mask my illness, so I can stand here now in front of you and talk to you all and appear on the outside as if there's nothing different about me. But there needs to be that data to monitor that change, to compare against how I may have been in education and outside of education socially, pre my encephalitis and my acquired brain injury, and also along the journey of when I started after having my acquired brain injury to now. How have I changed? How have I developed? Have I improved? Have I not?
There's just one thing maybe to add to that. I've thought, as I've been listening to the presentations today and thinking about this, that as somebody who's the least expert in the whole room on this, the thing that I'd find difficult is it's not just, you could collect the data and you've got a category, but the variation within that category, within that data would be absolutely immense. And I think when we address this, there's a danger in labels, there's a danger in collecting data, is that it then gives you permission to treat everyone the same. And I suspect within this area, somehow having a language or an approach to the data that allows me as a teacher and me as a policymaker to actually know the difference and to begin to think that each of those people or each of those groups has different needs and shouldn't be addressed in the same way is probably going to be the next challenge. But we need to get the data collected before we can actually go that
100%.
far. And then I'm going to, because we've done that data, I'm going to timely and flexible provision, our third one, if that'd be all right. Eden?
Absolutely.
Well done. You're first on this.
Yes. So I'm talking a little bit here about how, because obviously, as I said, and as I'm sure I've repeated many times throughout this already, because I had it when I was 6, I've had a long time that I've had to learn and change with my acquired brain injury. So I've had lots as well of changes. Lots of them are the changes that everyone goes through in school, which is when you change year groups, when I change from SATs, GCSEs, A-levels, university level, and each comes with its own growth opportunities and challenges, not only just for people who don't have extra needs, but especially for someone with an acquired brain injury. There's a really, really big push that we need to make on the awareness of ABIs, especially in conjunction with the return to education. Not just in terms of, can I do the same things? Can I get the same grades that I used to be able to get? But also in terms of socially. As I mentioned, I didn't have the greatest time socially in my schools. I had to have people sign up to be friends with me, to sit with me, because people didn't understand what an acquired brain injury is. They just knew that I was different. They knew that I didn't keep up with the jokes quite as quickly. They knew that if they wanted to go out and play, I was still sat eating my lunch because everything I did wasn't quite at the same pace anymore. If there would have been that awareness, if there would have been that training for those teachers so they could talk to the students, maybe I would have socially been able to acclimatise myself again better to that situation. In terms of that, there's also the idea that Joe briefly mentioned. If I needed support, I would get suggested by my teachers that I should go and take rest breaks during the normal school breaks. Obviously, that's not ideal because then you miss out on the socialisation time. But fatigue is real and fatigue does exist. Fatigue, as mentioned, isn't the same as tiredness. It is this massive, I don't want to say issue because it's this massive changing thing, but it is an issue. It is an issue that we have to deal with, that we have to cope with, that we learn to manage. I get much, much easier, that's not a word, but easier tired now than I ever used to. And I've had to learn that I can't do everything that I want to do. I can't do 5 different after-school clubs. I have to choose one. And that can be really hard sometimes. And I think what we're going to talk about in a minute with flexible teaching styles is so important for that. Because if you have the support there for you, so that if you feel like you want to be able to do something and don't know how, you can lean on those systems. That changes things irrevocably.
Okay, and before we go on to that, I just want to say one bit about the flexibility. Go back to the 1 and 2 children in the class. It's an awful lot of children when I was taught that I missed, but in truth, it wasn't a great number of children in each class that I taught, if that makes sense. And I could have got away without meeting their needs. It probably wouldn't have caused me a lot of trouble as a teacher, would have caused the 1 or 2 children a lot of difficulty. But when the number's not so great, sometimes their needs aren't heard in the sense of the school as an institution hearing them. And I think if we're really honest, we're never going to get to that point where every teacher, all 250,000 of them, is a sufficient expert in ABI to actually do well by the children with ABI who come in front of them. And so I think we've got to have the flexibility to say, well, how do we support teachers in that circumstance? I know what I would have wanted as a teacher and what we tried to do when we're policymakers, and that's bring people together. I taught in Coventry. I now work in education in Birmingham. In Birmingham, there's 450 schools. If you knew, if you were in a group, if you had friends, if you knew where else was an expertise. In Birmingham, we could have one school in each of the quarters of Birmingham that was the expertise, not to deliver, but to be a point of contact for the teacher who for the first time has realised that they've got a child in their class with ABI. They're not going to solve it by themselves. So the system needs to be flexible enough to say to the teacher, you've got to be aware of it. You've got to have basic training. You covered it in your initial teacher training, but you may need to go to somebody now to work out what you want to do next. And so onto our penultimate slide, I think.
Yes, it is. So as I mentioned, those transitions can be really, really hard. One of the things we want to work on in timely and flexible provisions is the question of how do we find pathways that support young people. It's about finding those ways that young people and their families can navigate that return. I was out of education full-time for 2.5 years. So when I then eventually went back in, it was a massive shift. Not only was I a different person, but school was a different place. Everyone was older. There were new social dynamics that I hadn't learnt because I wasn't in school for those 2.5 years. It makes a massive, massive difference if those teachers, if the other pupils, if everyone around you understands what you're going through so can support you through that.
Yeah, and the point I wanted to make here, I think, was about modelling this. It's, sending out a missive from the DFE is a first point because it puts it on people's agenda. But it might mean quite big change. Well, they're not big changes, they're subtle changes in schools, but they do need to happen. So whether you adjust your timetable, whether you think more about what happens to people at break time, so you have to make different arrangements then, they need to be modelled. We don't want all the teachers and all the schools working that out by themselves. So my ideal would be, once we get these changes in place, to get together those who are the experts, those who are making the policy, those who are delivering in schools, to try and model what the pathways are. Exemplars of good practice always enthuse teachers. And if they know that somebody else has done it, it makes it a lot easier for them. And we just wanted to finish.
Very last point, we promised, then we'll let you go. Have you got any other examples you want to share?
Our last thing was when we get it right. And this was just an optimistic thing. Sometimes it seems as though the problems are enormous. But when we both look back, you'll say it in a minute, but when I look back through my professional life, when I look back full stop, there's things we do get right, we can get right. The example I always give, because it's my age, is that when I went into teaching, the biggest problem was the underachievement of girls. And by collecting the data, working out what you want to do, sticking at it, funding it, getting everybody together, we now worry about the underachievement of boys. So I actually think for all our complaints, when we address a problem, we're quite good at solving it. So when we get it right, we do actually do quite well. I'm quite confident that when we get this right, it won't be perfection, but it will be better than it is now.
One of the main things that I always say is my closing thing. I've got many examples I could give you, but I won't bore you with all of that. But the main thing that I say is that I had a teacher who gave me booklets that she knew would help me, but might help other people. And it's that message, really. if you help that one student who you know has those needs, you never know who else in that classroom that resource, that method might help. So anything you can do is always better than nothing.
Thank you very much for listening. Look at that perfection for time.
So just really quickly, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all our speakers today. I think hopefully it's been an interesting symposium for everybody. Unfortunately, we have run out of time for questions, but please do come and grab us in the break if you've got anything you'd like to ask. And thank you very much for listening.
Time perfection.